Greetings, Onion Slice. So I've been thinking about Silent Hill F recently. I'm recording this video before Silent Hill F releases, but it's coming up in a couple of days here as I'm recording this video. So if you're watching this video after the game releases, please keep in mind that I haven't played the game yet and it's not fully released yet. Now, I personally think of Silent Hill F as a sort of jumping off point for the relaunch of the Silent Hill universe and the franchise as a whole. Konami has seen some success with the recent Silent Hill 2 remake developed by Bluebird team, and whether you like it or not, it is a good remake. Performance issues aside and all that stuff, I still think Silent Hill 2 remake is a very faithful and very well done remake when it comes to a Silent Hill game. Now, what makes a Silent Hill game a Silent Hill game? So in terms of Silent Hill F, in case you don't know anything about it, well, it takes away the Silent Hill town location and it moves it to a new area called Ibisugoka? I'm sorry for mispronouncing it. Anyway, it's no longer Silent Hill, as in the place itself, but is it is an actual different location, and it takes place in the 1960s. There are several meanings to what Silent Hill is, so let's take a look back and see. So usually the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Silent Hill is the atmosphere and the dread. You know, you get that pervasive sense of unease, of the uncanny, the fog, the distorted reality, and the decaying environments, and not pure jump scares per se, but more psychological tension, and you feel lost and you feel wrong, right, as you start the game. And usually, spoiler alert, as you play through the games, you discover very terrible things. The case of James Sunderland, where you think he's lost, he's an innocent guy looking for his wife, but by the end of the game, spoiler alert again, you discover that he is not such a great person, and you see that slow descent into what he is and who he is and what he's done and the terrible thing that he has done to his wife. Now, another thing that, speaking of this topic, another thing that makes Silent Hill is the ambiguity, right? The duality, and words that blur between real and supernatural. Visions, monsters that could be manifestations of guilt, or nightmares and mystery, symbolism, and sometimes the occult. So that's what Silent Hill is at the core, those first two things. Now, there are a couple of other things that, of course, gameplay-wise, make the game Silent Hill, and that is the exploration and the puzzles. A lot of the time, Silent Hill puzzles are very obscure and they are not very direct. They don't very much make sense. Like, one of the first things that comes to my mind is in the original Silent Hill 2, where you had to get a literal hair to use as a fishing hook. You had to tie it to a fishing hook, and you had to use the hair as a fishing hook and fish a key out of a hole. So sort of that kind of thing makes a puzzle, to give you an example, in Silent Hill. So not just monsters, much of the horror is internal. Personal guilt, grief, identity, relationships, the character's psyche is part of the environment as well. The sound design is also a huge thing in Silent Hill. So the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of Silent Hill is, not only the fog, but also the iconic soundtrack. Akira Yamaoka, one of the greatest musicians of all times and composers, is returning for Silent Hill F, so that's great. The sound design that builds mood, the ambient noise, the silence, environmental cues, music that supports the tone, haunting, discordant, moody, all those things come to mind when you think of Silent Hill. So I'm not too worried about that in Silent Hill F. We can probably expect all of that 100% for sure in this brand new game. Now, another thing that comes to my mind is limited resources and vulnerability. Sometimes weak weapons, scarce ammo, difficult monsters, survival horror, you feel fragile until maybe the very end of the game where they just give you stuff. That's if we're talking about the classic games, Silent Hill 1, 2, and 3, for example, even the remake. The setting that feels unnatural yet grounded is also another thing that comes to mind when I think about Silent Hill. Through the supernatural depictions of the environment, we also see a base of that is realistic, almost mundane, like a mundane setting like a town, a hospital, schools, punctuated but by distorted otherworldly versions of themselves. So that's also another thing that I'm expecting from Silent Hill F, a regular version of the world, but also a completely distorted version or otherworldish version of reality or locations that we can encounter in the game. If a new Silent Hill wants to succeed in being part of that lineage, it needs to bring many of these elements even while doing something new. So that's how I feel about the elements that make a Silent Hill game. Now let's talk about potential risks or things that you can watch out for. These differences are promising, but they are also introducing risk. Sometimes what you change for innovation might hurt what made the originals stand out. If action/melee combat becomes too dominant, the pacing might suffer. Classic Silent Hills often balance low dread, tension, exploring. Too much combat, too intense or frequent, could reduce the mystery and atmosphere. Although I'm not super thrilled about the no guns gameplay in Silent Hill F, I think melee only is okay, but it has to be spaced out. Like, if you put too many enemies back to back to back, it will just become a dungeon crawler. A lot of people are throwing the term Souls-like survival horror around when they look at Silent Hill F, and honestly, as someone who has played every single Souls game, including a lot of Souls-likes like Lies of P and of course every single From Software game, I can tell you that Silent Hill F is not a Souls-like game, although it has elements such as stamina and consistent constant combat of using long weapons, different types of weapons and stuff like that. I can safely tell you that those are elements in other games of the Silent Hill franchise. One of the main things that comes to mind is Silent Hill 3 that had a katana. Heather would run around with a katana or even a freaking morning star or a flail of some kind. So melee weapons are not strange or something that is unusual to the Silent Hill universe. So also, another important thing that I want to note is a lot of people are complaining about the stamina bar. Also, I'm not certain myself. I don't know how I feel about the whole health and stamina being on screen at all times, but those are all elements that were in the previous Silent Hill games. You just couldn't see them at all, 100% of the time. So the stamina bar and all that kind of stuff exists in other games, and it's a crucial element of other Silent Hill games. But they weren't often displayed on the screen at all times. So if puzzles or narrative become more explicit, less ambiguous, like symbolism, some of the uncanny mystery would be lost. So if that's not a thing in Silent Hill F, the identity of the game might suffer a little bit. Also, setting being culturally different is exciting, but it might feel disjointed if the Silent Hill identity, like fog, otherworld, psychological horror, guilt, trauma, isn't preserved strongly, in my opinion. New mechanics like stamina, dodge, counterattack need to be tight. If you're clunky or poorly tuned, they could frustrate more than terrify. We also saw some pairing elements in the gameplay that we've seen so far, so I don't know how much of Silent Hill that is. If it's true to the original name of Silent Hill. So where do we draw the line between spin-off and mainline entry? So this game falls more under the spin-off term than being a mainline game, so we should treat it as such. If you go into Silent Hill F thinking about it as a spin-off, you will most likely enjoy it for what it is, rather than it trying to be a Silent Hill game like the games from the 90s or the mid-2000s, which obviously that was 20 years ago, so of course you're not going to get that same feeling. So it's another thing to keep in mind. I always say this about Resident Evil, for example. When I play Resident Evil games, I don't expect a fixed camera angle game that has pixelated graphics. I expect, a realistic, more grounded game nowadays something like Resident Evil 2 or 4, or even 8 and 7. That's how you modernize a franchise entry rather than repeating the same thing again and again. That's just my 2 cents. In conclusion, so yes, Silent Hill F has a real chance to be a good Silent Hill game, perhaps even a great one, because it seems to pick up many of what made the original stand out. Atmosphere, psychological horror, mystery, dread, while making some interesting changes like the setting, the combat, cultural texture. Whether it becomes a classic like Silent Hill 2 will depend on balance, how well the new action complements, not overshadows, the horror, how well the mood is maintained, and how deep the emotional narrative layers are. So I think those are more important than seeing a stamina bar on screen. So if the game nails those things, it will be a good Silent Hill game. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about this in the comments down below. If you like this kind of video where I just ramble about things, let me know in the comments. Also, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more. I will be playing Silent Hill F as well as other games. I love survival horror games, so I tend to focus more on those, but I will be here for more releases soon. Anyway, take care, and I can't wait to see your comments.